Hello, brothers, and welcome to Heroic Stories. It's a series to strengthen Catholic men with real stories of heroic grit and faith, and it's brought to you from heroicmen.org. I'm your host, Dominic from Heroic Men. Each week, I sit down with a guest to ask them how they made it through their darkest moments, who their heroes were, and who they want to be a hero for. These are real men who've battled doubt, they've sought purpose, and they've changed their lives in ways that can inspire you and me to do the same. These are the stories that remind us that heroism isn't born, it's made. Hey man, welcome back. So Gabe is my guest on Heroic Stories today. He's somebody that we met online. He now works full-time with me at Heroic Men. He's my, he's been a marketing associate for 2 years, and now he's leveling up to be communications manager, something like that. So Gabe, welcome to Heroic Stories. Good to have you on.
Thanks, Dominic. Yeah, it's crazy how we did meet. I forget about that sometimes because we feel like we've been friends for so long, but we met online just by happenstance.
Yeah, you were just searching for like a fiction community and
Cool Catholic stuff.
you found mine, and then we ended up hitting it off and like, hey, you should come get a job working for this incredible, hyper-ambitious team trying to solve world hunger before Tuesday. Well, trying to handle, help men find a way to outreach and network with other men. So, okay, so for this conversation, for this show, I want to sit down and just chat with you. That's what we do with this series of conversations, to talk about how do men make sense of heroism, because a lot of men have different definitions of it, and our brand, it's what we call it, Heroic Men. Well, what would the definition of a heroic man be? You know what, let's just start right there. Hot seat. What would your definition of a heroic man be?
Such a good question, and something I've been pondering on for a while now. And the closest I've come to is something we've discussed as a team, but it's someone who continually tries to show up day in and day out. And so it's not necessarily that you're ace in life, you're winning it. You might fail the day before, but you come the next day ready to try again. That's the closest I've come to the hero's journey and the thoughts I have towards it. It's just someone who continually puts in the effort.
I think that's a great definition. Like you say, it's not about acing it and coming off like a superhero. So, okay, my favorite question now to be asking people is, what is your all-time favorite story, like a heroic moment or something, like you heard in the news, maybe it was in a movie, or something your mind goes back to when you think of, if I wanted to be a heroic man, this story is what comes to mind, and it lights you up. It's like, it just juices you every time that you think about it.
Yeah.
What is that story?
Well, I would love to give an ultimate Catholic answer and try and pull from the saints, which are their great, obviously amazing examples. But the one that always sticks out of my mind is actually from It's a Wonderful Life, the
Really?
old Christmas movie, George Bailey. And just, maybe later on we'll discuss more of the similarities and how I relate. But the idea of, this is so common, I feel like, in maybe in men's lives, but at least in my life, the idea that you want to pursue so badly your deep interests, but life throws curveballs and you have to push those aside to do a greater good or to take care of a family. And the story, if anybody's seen it, it's one of my favorite movies, but George Bailey goes through his life continually sacrificing his wants and desires to provide for his brother, his father, his children. And unfortunately, it gets to the point where at the end of the movie, he wishes he was never born because he's so chaotic. He's, his uncle's lost money. He's going to be arrested. Like, there's so many things piling on top. And you get to the point, and it doesn't look at first like the hero story because he just gives up, essentially. But in the movie, an angel comes down and shows him that his life was worth living. He did so much because he continually just showed up. And at the end, he had that full moment of reflection when all that he had done that he didn't see comes back to show that he actually was there and present and trying and putting in the work. And I relate to that because there's times in my life where I felt like, what am I even doing? And, not to the point of too dark of thoughts, but I have gotten to the point of like, what, where's my purpose in this world? Where do I belong? And I haven't had a George Bailey moment when the whole town comes back, but
No angels yet.
Not yet. I'm still waiting. But I think there's that moment of reflection, like, you don't know the impact you're doing just by showing up day in and day out for your kids, for your community, for your job, you don't know how God is using you to interact with others. So that storyline and to pull back, even like the Hercules storyline, uh, just trying to find your place in the world, but you don't get there until you fully let go of self in search of the good of others. I think that's like the one that rings really true, especially now as a father. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So why, I mean, there are obviously many different reasons why we need heroes in the world, but why does that kind of, that storyline, that message, why does that make so much sense to you? Like you just said, being of service to others.
I think because it gives such a better sense of purpose for one person, because in that story with George Bailey, he could have just said, heck to the world, I'm going to become an architect, I'm going to do what I want. But if he followed that trail, that's what they show. If he followed that train, well, they showed if he was never born, what would happen. But if he followed the train of just doing what he wanted, well, he would never have met his wife. He would never have saved his father's business. His brother would have died. And again, this is a very, dramatic storyline, but it shows if he chose himself the whole way, the ripple effects would have just been catastrophic. And that's a movie. So if we take it into our own lives, I think, because I'm thinking of my own decisions, like, I don't know, we wouldn't be where we are. I wouldn't be the man I was. I wouldn't be as, I would have had to go through the things that have chiseled away the layers of, selfishness. And again, I'm not obviously not perfect, but there's those things that are needed to help, I think, craft the men we were created to be. And especially when it comes to fathering, children, I feel like I would have been such worse of a father had I just chose selfish pursuits. But
Hmm.
some things have kind of whittled away at that, I think.
Yeah. And so you're now a dad of how many kids and where are you at in life?
Five. Yeah,
Yeah.
dad of five. It goes from ages 8 to 6 months. We did, it's one of these things so we got married young and started young, which is, kind of like what we wanted to do. But I think the pros and cons of that, the pros being we're young, we're right along, we have all the energy and youthfulness to be with these kids. But I know the con, or I don't know if a con or a more challenging point, I didn't have much worldly experience on my own to kind of bring to the table. I had to do a lot of that while raising the young kids, especially, going through really tough times, just figuring yourself out in your 20s. And I had to do that while having 3 kids and 4 kids. And so that has been, we're at I feel good now, but there's definitely, you don't realize all the things you have to work on until you're working on them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there may be some real value and importance to kind of, how do I say this? Training as a man while carrying a load of like people who depend on you. It's like a plant, having to grow. Depending on its conditions, it's going to grow a specific way. If it's, you've seen like these trees growing on the Hebrides, right? And they're literally arced to the left, and
Yeah.
every leaf is like bent sideways because the winds are so strong, and it just grew that way, and it learned to endure for that optimal environment
Yeah.
compared to a tree that's like perfect, climbs
Exactly.
or whatever, and it just
Yeah.
grows straight up and stuff. What I mean by that is trying to be a man, and maybe I'm speaking to my ethos of manhood here, but trying to be a man without any responsibilities, I'm not sure you're actually going to level up very quickly,
Hmm.
or maybe in a good way.
Yeah.
So it's like finding a cross and picking it up. And it could be, volunteering or finding a problem to solve, carrying more than what you would think you could do. Obviously, don't kill yourself, don't burn yourself out.
No.
But a man is one who bears up and
Yeah.
carries that cross and looks for something like
Hmm.
that. And I think there's a lot of young men who run away from that. So let me ask you this then. What was the most courageous thing that you think that you ever did? It was like the riskiest thing that you ever did. And you look back and go, I would probably never choose to do that again. I'm kind of glad I did, but what is that?
Yeah. I think because I have, there's a time in my life I think of challenging moments, but that was not necessarily my choice. It was just, reacting to a situation. But I think the riskiest choice we ever made, when we first got married, we made a big choice to move to Australia, from the U.S. to Australia, and we took all of our wedding money that we just got and put it all in this endeavor. I was on my way to go to college to become a pastor,
Yeah, you're
and
you're a convert, right?
that's
To
right. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. So I was, raised Protestant my whole life, and of the non-denominational space. And there was a college out in Australia, Hillsong, who we wanted to go, and I said, I'm going to become a pastor. This is, they're really good at what they do. So we put all of our finances together and said, this is our whole thing. And the challenging part was I had grown up as a teenager and kind of deciphering what I want to do with my life. I prayed about it a lot and felt really good, backing from the Holy Spirit, or what I considered the backing to go. And so I was like, I am a pastor. I'm called to be a pastor. And so made my way out there. And then during the process of being there for a month or we were there for almost 2 months, 3 months. Me and my wife started talking about the faith and the Catholic faith and just wrestling with it while there. And we had to make the decision to move back. And so I think it was tricky because I felt like it was a gamble just to start, to get there, to spend all that money and all that time and all that energy and effort to get there. And then the second part of that was what do we do now? Do we kind of switch everything up and go back and do that? And I think at the moment it was like, yeah, we just need to go back. But then when we landed back, I remember we were in our apartment. I sat down like, what am I going to do with my life now? Because the whole thing was set like in stone. I had pages of journals written down saying, you're going to be pastor. And this is, the whole thing. And so now that that's kind of changed, it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do? I have no college degree. I have no kind of real line of pursuit. We got no money. So it's like, what do we do now? And that's why I say, I had no choice. I just had to find a job anywhere. But that was challenging, and it makes you think like, well, what is my purpose then? I thought that was it, God. And then for a long time, I felt like I didn't really hear much. I would pray. I'd never veered from the faith ever, but I had moments where I'm like, what now? And I think that was the start of a lot of different things. So that was 2015. That was the start of a lot of kind of journeys like that and hurdles to climb and events to, but then there's other things that went down the line that were big and scary, but they weren't my choice. They were just kind of, I had to receive them.
And feel free to pass on this question, but I'm just curious, how much of that was like, how do I say, a situation that was kind of growing on you and it just felt like we have no other choice, we have to do this? And how much of it was the point where you yourself, independent of your wife, you decided, I now have to step out into the dark and I've got to make a call because there's a point at which it's on me. Like, what was that part?
I think it was more of the on me, because we kind of went through this pursuit, both in agreement, but like, hey, this is what I want to do. Let's get married so that we can do it together. So it's kind of like let's do this journey together, but it was mostly on my kind of, I don't know how you say it, drive. I don't know. And so when we had both had discussions of it, but we could have very well just stayed there for the year, finish out the semester and made a decision, but it was on me. I said, I feel like I'm wasting time here. That's maybe not the right way of saying it, but it felt like we just need to get back. This was not helping us at all. Mm-hmm. And we're actually just going to go further and further away from where we need to go. And so I kind of positioned to her, I said, I think we need to go back. And she said, okay.
Can't imagine that made life any easier, like for your family, dealing with a conversion like this.
Yeah. So that was the thing. When you came back, you had mixed emotions. Everyone was obviously happy that we're back in the same continent, but it was a bit different because, my family's all Protestant, other than my brother my older brother at the time, who had converted before me. It was met with, okay, why? What's going on? Glad you're home, but what's going on? And we're miles from there. Like, we have such a good relationship as a family now, being, in different zones of faith, if you will. But when we came back, it was a bit odd and awkward, and it took a bit of time to have those conversations. And I think, fortunately, I always kind of brought them up without, I didn't try to make a point. I just kind of said and not I didn't make the accusation like I was raised wrong or anything like that. It was mostly like, this is just where I found myself. This is where I feel, the truth of the faith lies. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. It's just what I'm not one to push others to do anything. Even my family, I said, I just, thank you, Mom and Dad, for how you raised me. been a Christian my whole life because you've had this beautiful, beautiful faith, and I'm just doing this. It's not a pushback. It's more of a where I feel like my faith journey is leading.
Yeah.
But it
Thank
was still
you.
difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, no, walking away from everything that well was normal. Like you just said, you took a shotgun to your diary, your future planner, just blew
Yeah.
it all away and started again.
Yeah.
I mean, you may not think so. I think it takes a lot of bravery to chart a new path like that, especially when there's no promise of safety or success.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's funny when I'm looking back, it just felt like matter of fact what had to be done. I didn't I could see that there's options, but there's a lot of times where like, well, so that happened and later on down the term, like I got laid off from a job and like that was just like led to a very dark and frustrating time. But it was just every step of the way is like I don't really hear specifically the direction of God. I just know that I have to just do this next thing. And I don't know. That was Oh, but and speaking of heroes, like that's where Mother Teresa really came in actually during that time.
Really?
Yeah, just hearing about her faith story of how she had just so many years of silence between her and God. And, I'm like, well, I'm no nothing like Mother Teresa. I mean, she literally a saint, and how she can, in her earnest prayer life, in her deep devotion, she could still feel silence and distance from God. I felt like, well, at least I'm not alone in that, and at least there's hope still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's keep going down that road then. Who are some of your heroes? So you've mentioned George Bailey and now Mother Teresa. Apart
Yeah.
from either fiction or saints or people in your life, who are the people that you kind of wish you could be like?
I mean, honestly, it was if I could, pull the card of, Saint Joseph. When we really came back and started working on our faith, I just thought of Saint Joseph, and I think of George Bailey, and I think of like these themes of monumental tasks put before us without any thought of like, how the heck am I going to do this? And I think of Saint Joseph, his whole life got flipped upside down in a way, like, and not to like, put any, but let's put a focus on him that found out his wife was going to have the child of God, and he has this. I mean, I can't imagine the thought of being in that position. Like, I have to raise the son of God. I'm just barely a good man myself, and I have I have to be very respectful in my relationship with my wife, who I thought it was going to be a certain way, and now it's different. And I think he just has to walk with this task given to him. And I love how at first I was confused, but like he's so quiet. We don't hear much of him. It's just that this silent dedication to, I just have to do what I have to do. And I take that as such, inspiration for what I need to. Like, there's a lot of times where in your life you have these tasks, like you just have to do it. And there's grace given to us, and there's hope and direction, but sometimes there's not. Sometimes just do the next best thing or the next right thing. And when we did the consecration of St. Joseph, that was very helpful to know that there's someone in heaven cheering me on who knows more than like, anybody what it's like to be a father of like, to be a father and to have some monumental tasks put before them. So that really helped. And it's tough. It's still a work in progress, or still a journey of getting to know who St. Joseph is. But just the fact that I had those mile markers of what he's gone through had helped.
Yeah, no kidding. I think this past month, I think it was his feast. Yeah, it was his feast day. So I wrote I tried writing an article about what a monumental figure he is, because it's, for me, he's not somebody I have a devotion to. So I never slowed down to really pay attention and just think about him. So tried doing that for a minute on his feast day, and actually came up with some pretty interesting, I thought, stuff that was pretty compelling and interesting. Just the fact that when he woke up that one morning that Mary is going to be his wife, right? First of all, he didn't plan on any of that. Like, he had it made, he had a job, he had a career, he had a whole future kind of, figured out.
To be, yeah.
Where were they living at the time? It wasn't Bethlehem. It was, I don't know. They were in wherever they were, probably near the temple or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he had his whole life figured out, and then she shows up, and all of a sudden he's called to this whole new thing, and he's ready to quit, and an angel says, stay. He's like, okay. And then he's got a hit put out on the Son of God, and he's got to flee the country, and then wait for the guy to die, and then come back, and the successor is just as vindictive, and so he's got to, like, I can't go back to my hometown, let's hide out in this other little place, and now start from scratch again, a whole new career, and just, Yeah, the resilience of the
Yeah,
guy
I
is
know.
it is inspiring. So, okay, so you've
Yeah.
got George Bailey maybe and Saint Teresa of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, yeah, and Saint Joseph. Anybody else that specifically inspires you? Someone who feels heroic to you.
Yeah, and it's tough because those are the ones that come right to mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have like, I have a family member who's very like that kind of fits into my story when I lost my job. That's another thing of being this just wonderful source of generosity, which I would love to be at some point. But no one else specifically.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, cool. So let's last question then is this idea of who do you want to be a hero for? And before we hit record, I told you that, or I said, let's not play the God card and let's not play the family card. I
That's
know
fine.
you're a married man. We both are.
That's fine.
And obviously we want to be heroes for our families. So,
Yes.
okay, that's part of it. That is a, a joyful cross that we have picked up and we've
Yes.
committed to carrying for the rest of our lives. So I get that. So, okay, you can include that in your answer. Fine. But who is there in
Yes,
you
there is.
yourself as a person within the human family?
Yes.
Who do you, Gabe, yourself want to be a hero to step up and sacrifice for maybe a group of people or a specific person? Where
Yeah.
do you go with that?
My mind immediately goes to specifically teenage boys. I feel like that's where in my life I needed the most help, and I feel like I didn't get it. There's so many things pushed against in their teenage years. There's different temptations, there's different senses of identity. There's so much in that time frame, and it kind of solidifies the worldviews you're starting to have, or it shapes them even further. And I think that point in my life is when I was really kind of wrestling with sense of self-worth. Where does my worth come from? I had built up this view that is based upon what I do, not who I am. And you kind of, especially as a young guy, you start putting yourself, where do I fit in the world amongst women and girls? Like, how do I fit in? How am I valued? And there was times where I felt like, no one even cared to look at me. You just get this mixed sense of value, and I so badly wish I want to somehow get to the point where I can, either through a camp, a summer camp, or anything, just talk to teens in that age to know that there's a God that loves them. I feel like which is tricky because I heard that message growing. I was born and raised Christian. I knew the Bible, I knew God, and I knew the stories, I knew everything, but it didn't sink in. And there was actually I think it was I forget what conference it was, and I forget the name of the sister, but she said in her own words that she lived her life like God was a coach she was trying to impress. And that resonated so deeply with me now, but I was a teenager too. I said, I just felt like I was just trying to impress God, and any sort of small mess up just was like, I'm not paying attention to Gabe anymore. Because I felt like I just layered God on top of how I thought the world viewed me. My family, my friends, my teachers. I felt like I was only noticed if I excelled. But if any mark lower than excelling, I was not noticed. And I don't know if that, if it's middle child syndrome. I don't know if that, what, you could give out so many different layers to it. But I so badly wish, and it was Father Larry Richards who said in one of our the Heroic Men's talks that the devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sin. God knows your sin, but he calls you by your name. That phrase I'd never heard until last year. Had I known that as a teenager, had I really settled with that, gosh, things could have been different. Because I walked the line thinking I am just one tiptoe away from falling off God's mercy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just barely hanging on. And at that point, I'm like, I don't even know if he even loves me. Because all the pieces feel like you have to do good to be recognized. You have to be perfect because we're called to be perfect. I think that's even something that Chris Mann mentioned in a previous episode.
Yeah.
I resonated with that as well. This call to perfection, I was like, I am so far from it. It's just such a mixed or warped view of how God loves us and who we are and our value. And just to know that we're loved by no matter what we do. You can mess up a million times and God still loves you. That concept didn't ring in or hold true in my heart.
Yeah. So how did you make it through? Like, how did you survive those teenage years carrying the weight that you did, trying to make sense of the world to get to
Yeah.
where you are today? Like, how did you do that? And what do you think about that now?
When I think about the teenage, I mean, I know I definitely created loopholes in my mind to kind of push through and go with temptation, and I made myself have loopholes in my mind of what I thought was right and what I could do. Then other times I would just neglect everything. I remember specifically my junior year of high school. I did not veer from the faith, but I was like, I'm just going to neglect all sense of trying to do good. Just I'm still a good person. I'm still like, I'm not one to like steal or do it or swear really. I'm like, but I'm not going to try as hard. I'm just going to neglect that. I'm not even going to think about it. And then it was only when we started the journey of becoming Catholic that I really started leaning into what I need to do. And then confession was the first time. It's funny how I thought confession was going to make me feel like terrible. It was the first time I actually felt free.
Why is that? That's such an interesting point.
It was because I never knew if I was actually forgiven. And it was the first time I felt like there's a grace offer that I could know for a fact that in that moment, at least, and obviously I'll work on scrupulosity later, but in that moment, I was forgiven. And I just, so that was 23 years of just building up this guilt and shame and thinking like, oh, I asked God for forgiveness, but I don't know if he actually forgave me. And to have that first moment of like, in this moment, I am free. And then now going forward, learning about scrupulosity, I didn't know that was actually, I didn't know what that was. And I didn't know, I'm like, oh God, am I actually forgiven? But that was the start of knowing that there's actually love on the other side of my, prayers. And there's actually hope on the other side of my sins. But before that, I just didn't know. And it gave me more stronger footing to walk on in my faith versus this game of like, I don't know, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. It's kind of like no one really has the same answers. So I'm kind of just going off the, seat of my pants. And it's just, so that was the first time I was like, okay, there's something I could actually work on and work towards and have hope in. But yeah, still work in progress. But that was the first sign of like genuine hope.
Thanks for joining us on Heroic Stories. If this story connected with you, send it to someone. And if you want to chat with us about anything that we've said, head on over to our community at heroicmen.org. We're here for every man out there who feels they're made for more, has the faith to step up, and doesn't know what to do. Come and share your journey with us. Can I share something about a group of men like you? The Heroic Men app is powered by an alliance of supporters. They step up so that others can access life-changing content and community at no cost. Right now, there's another man out there who needs stories and content like this. Maybe he can't even afford a bus fare to Mass. Maybe it's a teen questioning if he matters at all. And maybe it's a father searching for real brotherhood. Your $5 a month covers his ability to access this content. One more soul reached, one more life changed. $5 a month, that's it. If you can, consider paying it forward today. And if you can't, share Heroic Men with another man. That alone could bring another man back to faith in Jesus Christ. And here's how we give even more back to you. Every donor is welcome to join an exclusive group inside our online community. We want to learn from you and work with you to strengthen men so that no man is left behind. Visit heroicmen.org today to stand with us. Someone paid it forward for you. Now will you do the same?